Just fucking do it. Subscribe now.
Last night you saw who? Pardon? Yeah, fear. Yeah. That stuff he's done on the tower, I've done. The thing that I always, because I've watched it several times, his buddies, his two buddies there that have, of course they're not going out on the thing, and you got this, I got your back, that shit that most people don't understand what I got your back really means. But anyway, that's a whole other, I got your six and all that horse shit. And then, of course, he does it. When I did it, same thing, I got your back. Aren't you guys jumping? No. And when I bungee jumped a few years ago in New Zealand, because of my hips and the artificial parts I have, they don't strap my feet. They strap my waist. Because if they strap my feet, and when you snap at the bottom, either my knees or my hip or something might go awry. But everybody had my back then. We were standing in a line. There was about 40, 50 mile an hour winds. And they had to calm down to 20 before you could jump. It was a queue about from here to the bathrooms back there. So I roll up and everybody's standing there, and they're like you, talking shit like your dick's this long and all, So I took $100 bill and I walked up to the front of the line. I said, I think that we've had a dip in the wind, haven't we? Absolutely, sir. So I go up and I jump and I come back and these guys are still talking shit. So then I go to lunch and I come back because I want to jump again. They're still talking shit. And then somebody said, hey, old timer, how'd you get up there? I said, I gave him $100. You could probably do it for 10. And then I went parasailing. Is that right? Yeah, parasailing. And I come back and they're still talking shit. That's you. Because of this. Some of you have more baggage than that guy. And Sally and I, having lived in India, have seen guys with more shit on their bike than that. They have a baby or two in front, And we all know who gives us that baggage. But most of it. Some of it we produce ourselves because we get used to our default becomes self-sabotaging activity. From who you marry, who you date, who you this, who you that. And it becomes, it's like I was on a panel a long time ago in Cleveland, I think it was, about how you break the cycle of poverty. And there were guys there and gals that had been, in shitty situations and gotten out of them. But they still moved back to Cleveland because it was their comfort zone. And I believe, although nobody would admit, and nobody's admitted to me since then, that it's because they like being a big fish in a little pond. They're a big guy. Like in the Rocky movies, when he comes back and he's got the gym and he's got the restaurant, and then at the very end of the Rocky movies, he's got a restaurant and shit like that. Why did you come back? Because he's a big, a couple of you in this room may suffer from that. But I got up at 1 o'clock in the morning. I woke up at 12:18, and I'm thinking, and then I get up and I go to my second office, which is right next to our bedroom, and I work for about an hour and a half. I'm thinking about this group and what I might change, and because every group is different, and every group has a different amount of this. When I was in Nepal, and I alluded to it yesterday, they got a different kind of baggage. Okay? They're told from when they're little, you go to the school that they can't afford. And 3 people get, exaggerating, 3 out of 15,000 get a scholarship. And normally because somebody bribed or somebody fucked somebody. And so, and then for me to get up and tell them that your best option is out. Well, your best option was out a long time ago from wherever you're part of. And virtually nobody's there to tell you that. And and I told you, out of my neighborhood, there was not many ways. There was either athletics, and in the Latino, Hispanic community, normally that means boxing. Once in a while, baseball, but not basketball or not football, et cetera, et cetera. The other way is be just a gangster and just fit right in and be a fucking gangster. And the third is serendipity. You might be able to marry your way out because you marry somebody rich. I never met anybody rich while I was living there, but they tell me, the dream is about 10, 12 years ago, we had a guy who was from my neighborhood, and he was ostensibly rich. And he had made, 20, 25 million bucks. And he started as the guy, when you go to Caesar's Palace or in Vegas, the guy with the hat that greets you, when you pull in. He started as a car park guy, and then he became that. And he saved up money, and he bought real estate. And okay. But he says there was a myth about a blue-eyed guy 20, 30 years before him that was the Mexican god, me, same neighborhood. And he sat right there, and I actually talked to him more, because I don't want to talk to you guys, but I talked to him more. Could be I relate, I don't know why. Okay, he was a little teeny shit, he looked like a midget Pancho Villa, And so, and he said, yeah, there's a myth. I think he lived on Birkdale Street. Of course, I lived on Birkdale Street. What did you hear about him? What did you tell me? And he says, yeah, but he's white. I'm a wedo. I'm a light skin. And so that's their reason. I'm not the Michelangelo you guys thought or made up about Josh Kim, but I'm white. And that's a good enough differentiation, a wedo, for me to have been successful. The reason, I'm blue-eyed. Okay? And some of you, all of you to a degree, fall back into your default, which is, self-sabotaging activity, either because you got a toxic mom. She's loving and nourishing, but she's still toxic. How can a loving and nourishing mom still be toxic? Well, they can't. Okay? I discount most of your dads. And now single parenthood, which I alluded to, I think, the first night, is horseshit. And although there's studies now and books now that say single parenthood could work. And they show where one case out of 1,100. So it doesn't really work, okay? But you can get a grant from the government. Remember, the government's, and we're going to talk about government contracts today. The government will give you money for anything because ostensibly their default is just print it. They have to have no return on investment. And as I told you, the first day when I went to China, and I finally got the information out of them, that they had started 16,000 companies, and they had 3 exits. 3. And those exits were just because the companies had cash flowed, and so they took money out of them to pay salaries, et cetera, for other companies. But basically, their return on investment was 0. It was negative. 16,000. Well, they don't have the worst track record that I know of. There's a lot of institutions that have worse. Like no successes. No successes. And as I told you a day or so ago, when Sally and I started giving our money away, and we want to see your financials. And when you ask Boy Scouts for the financials, it reverberates. It's like, what are you, crazy? We're the fucking Boy Scouts. Or when you ask the Red Cross, or whatever it's called different things in different places. But I want to see the fucking numbers. And actually, Sally, because her accounting background, she wants to see the fucking numbers. How much money actually goes to the kids. And when you start to drill down on, after doing this more than 30 years, there's 5 or 6 areas that you build up baggage more readily or easier. And that's starting with your family. And it's normally your mom, because she doesn't know how to be nourishing and loving and not be toxic because her parents were toxic. And of course, it's tough to put a cap on your mom's ass. I mean, but I told you the guy that was one of the more successful, I'm walking down the street and I see him, convicted felon. And he says it was hard until my mother, through my sister, got a hold of me and says, how come I don't have his new phone number? Because his mother got, if you don't have my new phone number, you're not part of my new life. That's tough. Sally and I, respectively, didn't talk to our mothers for 7 and 8 years. 7 years me, 8 years her. Didn't talk to. See, nothing. No letters, no nothing. Well, I don't write letters anyway, but 7 years for me, 8 years for her. It's harder for a daughter. A daughter's a daughter the rest of your life, and a son's a son until he takes a wife. Used to be the old adage. 7, 8 years. But then when she came here to die, I didn't know she was as sick as she was. She knew she was sick, but she came here to die. I don't know. And when she'd walk around the estate in the morning for her exercise, and if it was raining, she didn't walk in the rain. She had an exercise bike, and she lived in a cottage right down the road. One of you stayed in it. And she'd come to the window, and she'd see, she'd ask the guys that are working on the estate, is my son home? Yeah. Well, let me show you in, Mrs. Peña. No. He's too busy. She'd come to my office window, and my back's to the office window, and I never turned around. And she'd stand there and stare at me. She never stood foot in this castle. Never set foot. It was so far out of her comfort zone. You should be so fucking lucky that your family doesn't set foot in your fucking house. Some of you live with your parents. Now, I know it's an Asian deal, the Indians, you're their pension plan for the Asians. Some of the Hispanic too, you're their pension plan. When my dad came here for 3 weeks, he stayed 6 days. He made friends with a gardener, played golf with my head of security. We had about, not 5 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes of father-son kind of talk. I don't know what that means. So I've never had any father-son talk with any of my kids, or father-daughter. I'm not sure what that means, because I didn't experience it. I had to read about it in a book, or Google fuck it. And he stood when we were at graduation night, when we were sitting in the drawing room. There's a big, what do you call it? Napoleonic crystal chandelier from 18-something or other. And he stood under there, and I got my arm around him like this, and he looks up at me, and I still remember the shining of the light off his bald head. And he says, just tell me it's not drugs, meaning you didn't make your money from drugs. And I said, no, Dad, it's kind of drugs. It's oil and gas. That's oil and gas. And then he left. You should be so fucking lucky that your parents know they can't be part of your future, and they step away. But instead, having gone through your files again last night when I got up, they're living vicariously through you. If your parents got to live through you, and you, just imagine how fucked they are. What the fuck have you done? Nothing. And you're their best shot at greatness. What the fuck? And I used to talk to my parents like this. When I was 17 years old, I said, something's not right. I tried to join the Air Force. My dad drove me back. He says, you're not ready to leave. You're ready to leave when I tell you you're ready to leave. And I said, well, I didn't know what help was. Anyway, so we went to see a psychiatrist. And when you're a cop, psychiatrists donate their time because cops are all fucked up, like in the movies. And so we're sitting there in the psychiatrist, and he's a guy named James Jacobs, a very famous psychiatrist. He studied with Anna Freud, Freud's daughter. And he's and after about 30, 40 minutes of the first session. He said, Mr. Peña, me, he says, you don't have to come back anymore. Your problem is not you. Your problem are your parents. And they may or may not be able to work it out. And these sessions will become even more toxic than your life at home. I couldn't imagine that it could be any more toxic than at home, but I took his word, scooted my little ass out the door, and I never came back. But I knew something was wrong. I was an intuitive little shit, even though I tried to burn the school down and shit like that. Virtually every family in this room, something's not right with it. Abso-fucking-lute. Not every other, but every. And in most cases, it wasn't, and I don't like to use the fault word, but it wasn't your fault because it was fucked up before you got there. Now, we know for a fact medically that from the end of the first trimester, you can hear, the little shit inside can hear voices from the end of the first trimester, first 3 months. So now you're a parent, you're biological parents. And remember I asked you the question, are you on purpose? Some of you didn't know. Some of you knew absolutely you weren't on purpose. So at a quiet moment, not a Thanksgiving or some, Hanukkah or some bullshit, don't ask your mom. Don't bust your mom's balls. Ask your dad. And this is going to be the answer. That's your answer. Means you were not on purpose. But you can hear them scream, talking at the end of the first trimester. So let's just say your biological parents are students. He's in medical school and she's studying to be a fucking librarian. There's some bullshit, right? And then the guy, you're working a couple jobs, the med student or the law student, whatever, and you come home and your wife says, I have a surprise for you. And she's going, nah, 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 nah. And now they say we're pregnant. In my day, they didn't say fucking we're pregnant. I'm pregnant. And so then he goes berserk. Now, end of the first trimester, why it takes her 3 months to figure out she's pregnant. That's a whole other story. I could write a book about that. But anyway, you stupid bitch, why don't you keep your legs shut? And you hear that. And you wonder why when you're born. And then you have a second, third, fourth kid, and dad treats them better than you. Because you're the reason he's not a doctor. You're the reason he's not a lawyer. And that stack gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I've told you I've had grandparents in 3 generations. And by lunchtime today, they're all sobbing. Why'd you fuck me up, Grandpa? Why'd you fuck me up, Mom? And to say that this is not politically correct to address your parents like this now, it's never been, but even now, it's worse. Doesn't make it any less true. Doesn't make it any less true. Comments about fear. And I didn't realize that guy has 2 brothers that are actors. I didn't know that. Because I saw a movie on a plane after I first viewed this, and then, fuck, they kind of look alike. They got this, I think they've got the same name, but there's 3 brothers that are those Australian actors. Any questions, comments about that? Yes, sir, in the back.
I thought it was very interesting that even though he probably has millions of dollars, he's still scared of losing it because of his baggage. He's used to being poor.
Like Sally and I say, we've been poor and we've been rich and there's no comparison. And I'm never going to be poor again. I'll put a bullet in Sally's head or give her a cyanide pill, make sure she swallows it, and I'll put a bullet in my head. No fucking way. Not going to happen. Even though I know, even at almost I can make it again. But no fucking way. I'm not going to go through those speed bumps that appear to be Mount Everest ever again. A lot of the big actors, stars started out, with nothing. Like Sylvester Stallone, who also can fit under my armpit. But my mother during the Depression, when she came over in in 1924 with my grandmother, her mother, illegally across the Rio Grande River. My mom's mom, they used to shop once a week, and my grandmother, when we get back, 5 families lived in one house. When my grandmother would take my mom and her sister into a closet and shove the food down their throat, and they'd all eat it in 1.5 days, a week's full of food, because my grandmother was afraid that the other families would eat it. From the time my mother was about 4 or 5 till she was 8 or 9. That was how she ate. In a dark closet. I asked my grandmother once, Lola, ¿qué pasó? What the fuck? She said that she didn't want the other families to think that she didn't trust them, because she'd rather be liked than effective. So my mom had a food disorder. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. All her life until she died. And she always thought she was fat. She weighed 106 pounds. She never weighed more than 106 pounds, except when she was pregnant with me. My mother had 4 miscarriages, almost died the last 2. And food was, it was not like I'm not saying we're normal, but we're more normal about food. Some of you have eating disorders in this room. But that's us. And unless we throw some of that shit off, you're on the 10 or 12-year plan, if you're on a plan at all.